Good day and thank you for joining ＳիվիլNet. So before I introduce my today's guest, I'm going to give you a hint. So take a look at this video. It's going to tell you what we're talking about and it's going to be exciting.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Exotic Wine Travel. I'm your host, Matthew Horkey. Today, I am very excited about the episode that we're about to do. It's a fascinating country. We spent a lot of time there. It has a very ancient wine history and also a very new wine history, and that's Armenia. I have a lot of examples here. Now, we're only going to taste one of these today because this is from our personal collection. There's so much to say. Well, first of all, Armenia is interesting. It actually technically has the oldest winery in the world, the Areni One Cave. It's the, archaeologically speaking, dates back to 4100 BC. But under the communist rule, winemaking was kind of eradicated. Armenia was left to just making brandy or cognac. And in the last 6 years, there's been a renaissance in terms of winemaking there in Armenia.
So, Dr. Matthew Horkey and Shireen Tan, your book is out already. Uncorking the Caucasus Wines from Turkey, Armenia, and Georgia. I have a copy here. Shireen, we saw the video. You weren't there. You were behind the camera?
I'm always mostly behind the camera, yeah.
And how does this work when you do this little segment? Let's start there.
I would say that actually the YouTube channel was more of a creative outlet for Matt because I was more into the writing and the marketing aspect of wine. So most of the time Matt will be the one deciding on the content and all that. And also because of my background, I was a little bit into visual and branding. So then I was behind the camera giving the idea that, hey, this background looks better and we should go with this angle. Yeah.
So how did this idea come out? You guys are travelers.
Yeah, we are.
I guess so. Wine gypsies.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
Yeah, nomads, yeah.
So, you mind if I start? Yeah. So basically, what happened is Shireen was working a big-time corporate job in Singapore. I'm a chiropractor by training. I had private practice in Singapore, but we were planning to start a company where we could travel around the world and be location independent. And when we left Singapore in May of 2015, we said, you know what, the first couple months are just going to be a sabbatical, and we found all we were doing was going to wine regions, tasting wine, talking to producers. And from that point, when we got to this region, the whole story is about the birthplace of wine really started to unfold, and we started to become really inspired. And it's something that we really wanted to share with the rest of not only the wine world,
So it wasn't like you had too much wine one day and said, let's go to the Caucasus.
No. No.
We actually knew about the countries very well. We always wanted to come to Armenia, Georgia, and Turkey, and this entire region. We knew quite briefly as well that this is the birthplace of wine. But back to your question, the thing is, when we came here, we weren't planning to write a book yet. So it was really a form of inspiration for us, and this area, particularly in Armenia, it was a genesis of the change in our life and also the genesis of the book.
This especially Armenia, will probably always have a special place in our heart because this is really the point. When we came here, the modern wine industry is only about 5 years old, and we started to see all these stories unfold, and that's when we became really inspired to take all our notes and turn it into a book and a bigger vision of business.
So, Turkey, Armenia, and Georgia, it's in your title. Is it so that no one will be offended because each of us claim to be the cradle of wine?
Well, you know, it's so funny. So we had some displeasure, I guess, so especially from Armenians about some of the title. But, you know, technically, so winemaking in this region dates back to about 8000 BC in what is now Eastern Anatolia, what was previously known as Western Armenia, south of Georgia, Armenia, and then also what is now Northern Iran. But one producer actually here said it best. He said, you know, if you look at the birthplace, the history of wine, the evidence is about 8000 BC, that's 10,000 years ago, and recorded human history only started 3000 BC, maybe 2000. So all that wine predates all these political boundaries. We didn't even actually kind of know what who the people were at that point in time.
Was that a complication as well to get into the history so much that we, the local nations, don't understand?
There was a lot of complications, but we actually look at the peer-reviewed studies to back up some of our stand. But on top of that, I mean, studies are studies. Actually, what's interesting and what people don't often hear is, you know, the anecdotal and insights that we hear, the stories on the ground. So we put some of those things in as well, including a quote from our Georgian friends who said, Armenia, they don't even make wine. So, but these are the interesting stories that we really want to tell. But also because Armenia, Georgia, and Turkey, I mean, we can think about it this way. Wines could have started all at the same time, spontaneously, all around this area, because after all, you do share quite similar agricultural background and landscape in this specific area called the Cradle of Wine. So our take is that let's not talk about who started the wine first. Let's talk about the Cradle of Wine, the history that they all shared, and then where they are today. So we also, besides focusing on the Caucasus, we also look at indigenous varieties. We want to focus on those ancient varieties that could be used for making wine 8,000 years ago, but survived the passage of time.
Well, I hear that we almost lost a couple of varieties that were
lost a lot. In fact, especially in Armenia. Armenia has lost so many because during Soviet times you were relegated to make brandy. Yeah, to make brandy. But what's very unique and exciting about Armenia is the grapes. What happened in Europe in the late 1800s, early 1900s is a bug infested all the European vines and spread out through all of Europe, and vineyards were completely ravished. It's called phylloxera. In Armenia, the bug never came here because the elevation's too high and the soil's volcanic. So it couldn't survive. So that's what you have that's special here. Some of these vines that us wine geeks say are pre-phylloxera vines.
Yeah, we consider them purebreds. We get excited about it. Yeah.
So is this what's special about wine coming out of the supposed Cradle of Wine?
Armenia,
is the variety. Is there any cultural or any kind of thing that makes wine out of this area special?
I think there are many areas, but one of the areas would be because of the varieties here that can't be found anywhere else in the world. But of course, just like wines from all countries and regions, we have what we call the terroir, which is the soil, the earth, and the climate. And often, a lot of vineyards in Armenia, they are filled with volcanic soil, which can really potentially change the way the wine tastes. And then a lot of the vineyards are also planted at extremely high elevation that can be considered as high or higher than the famous Mount Etna region in Italy. So there's a lot more to the wines here.
And also what's fascinating is, for instance, a focus is like, because of what's going on now in Turkey, wine travel is not the easiest, and wine production obviously isn't encouraged or sponsored by the government. So if we take a look at maybe Armenia and Georgia, the wines are so different because the Georgians still hold on to their traditions of making wines in what they call quaveri. Armenia, you call it karas, those buried amphora. And the Georgians don't use, these small producers, these group of 30 don't use chemicals, they don't use fertilizers, 100% organic, biodynamic. They don't do anything to the wines except seal them, then bottle them. Whereas in Armenia, it's really interesting because a lot of the wineries are all repatriates. Armenians that have been abroad, have tasted great wine, they come back, they've invested so much money in these awesome facilities, top-of-the-line equipment. The wines are very modern styled, so it's really interesting to see the contrasts.
It's fun because a couple of years ago there was no talk of Armenian wine, while Georgian wine was like gaining a lot of international ground. Now, have you kind of caught up with them, or we're still not on the international market?
I think there are two very different approach and different positioning. In fact, what we try to tell people or winemakers is, in our perspective, there shouldn't be any sort of competition or comparison at all. Because to the both of us, we agree that what's really exciting to be here in Armenia now is how often do you get to see the rebirth of an ancient wine culture, to witness it with your own eyes and experience against the progress. And secondly, the winemaking style here is really different. A lot of winemakers also believe in the more organic, little intervention approach here in Armenia. But your style is more of the, I would say, the contemporary international winemaking style, where you'll be very particular about cleanliness. You use barrel, which is very similar to the European way. Whereas Georgia, a lot of them, or rather we think that their key strength is in qvevri style making. So qvevri wine, where you age your wine, ferment your wine in vessel, and the taste is so different. So what they're known for now, exactly.
It's almost like the Georgians have really focused. If I compare food, like you have the movement of maybe a raw or a vegan, but still nice food.
Exactly.
But it's a little bit odd versus maybe still low intervention but fine dining fusion food. That's kind of the difference between Georgia and Armenia. They're both really awesome. They have their niches, they have their unique tastes.
Yeah, it's like tomato. Right? We're talking about it. It's like Georgia could be harvesting tomato, whereas Armenia is making like the best tomato sauce. Like there is a difference in it. Whereas that in another country, maybe in America or something, they're making like ketchup. They're the same, but really different taste. And
Okay, so I was researching your book a little bit after meeting you the other day, and well, in the description it says there are anecdotal insights and also evidence. So I think by anecdotal, that was my impression, that by anecdotal evidence you meant some myths.
Oh yeah.
Regarding wine.
So it's okay.
Go
I don't
ahead,
mind if I start.
yeah.
So one of our favorite producers is actually in Georgia. He was a geologist. He was a medical doctor, now turned winemaker, and also romantic. His house is kind of like this office here, filled with awesome books from all different kinds of cultures. He's a romantic, and when he was telling me the stories, he was telling me all about these Georgian myths. Like, for instance, the ancient soldiers would take cuttings of the vines before they go to war and put them in their sheath, and if they were to fall, they would hope that they would be fertilizer and come back as a vine. And I remember at one point, some, maybe not him in particular, but some people said, we don't even need the hardcore archaeological evidence. We know it in our hearts and our stories that it was here, that here's where it started.
How about Armenia? Any mythical wine stories about the...
There's a lot in written studies, and people also talk about, not written studies, in writings, and also people have their own set of belief and philosophy about wine, But it's also what's interesting, right?
It's also, like in Armenia, for instance, depending on faith or religion, they're really strong belief they're the descendants of Noah. And whether that's archaeological fact or not, so that's I guess some anecdotal evidence or stories that come out of here, Armenia.
How about the insights? As in anecdotal, something funny. Did that happen?
Patrick, you want to talk about Patrick?
You can.
Yeah. Facts are
funny stories? Maybe
funny stories about our history of wine.
Because it's if I can make this comparison, is this the wine and Caucasus version of Eat, Pray, and Love? Without
actually, that's a nice comparison you make over there.
I would hope that it would be Eat, Pray, Love, because that means we'd be very successful.
But I think that's a lot of interesting moments, but actually I would say more touching moments than amusing moments, because it's a homemade winemakers, or even winemakers who are having really small production, where they brought us to their house or brought us to their inspiration of their wineries that really move us. Perhaps one of the things that really got us to start thinking about how we are going to document our book was when we met the winemaker of Old Bridge Winery. Are you familiar?
No.
It's in the Armenia area, and there used to be a bridge. It's on the Api River, now that I remember. It's built in the 13th century for the people on the Silk Road who want to cross, and apparently it's a very well-known bridge for people who want to rest and want to drink a wine from Armenia. So when we met the winemaker, it started out very spontaneously. We were tasting his wine and all that, and then he told us, let me show you the Armenia One cave, which was closed at that time. And then afterwards, he brought us to the bridge and he said, this is the inspiration for my winery. It's called Old Bridge. And then he pulled out his wine label, and it has the exact illustration of the bridge on the wine. So these are the moments when we feel that, these people are trying to bring their past, their history, their family and inspiration to the present and share with people. And that's what constantly moves us.
I think the only funny story I could share with you is our driver in Georgia, when he was taking us around. it was a group of 4 of us, and we told him we're going to Armenia to investigate the wines. And he said, there's no wines there. Armenia doesn't make any wines. And I said, no, there's actually this famous wine, Zora, that's actually widely available around the U.S. And he said, when the Russians blockaded a trade with Georgia, they were selling Borjomi water in Russia, but it wasn't really Georgian. And at the same time, our friend was messaging his Armenian friend, and his Armenian friend said, of course we have wine, don't listen to the Georgians. And then our Georgian driver got a little bit upset. So I think that was probably the funniest.
Yeah,
It's part of the culture.
There's no harm, it's just
neighborhood. We're loving neighbors.
I love the little bicker between friends, and
it's all in fun between those 2 countries though, so that's what makes it fun.
Okay, thank you very much. So nice talking to you and learning more about your adventures and your book. And also, we thank the viewers for being with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Be well.